Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. I'm Mira Rubin here with you on Enlightened World Network. And today's topic is rattling the cage. And what we're going to look at is challenging our assumptions and how that can our open us up to new possibilities. Unexamined beliefs, for example. Anyway, it should be an interesting conversation. I hope you'll join us for it and leave comments, and I'll respond. If you're wanting to engage, you can find us on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page to comment, and then I'll be able to see that, or the Enlightened World Network YouTube channel. So before we get started, good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. So good to have you joining us this morning. Before we get started, let's just take a minute or two to get present. Let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding your lungs, flowing into your bloodstream, nourishing all your cells, all your organs, bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out, illuminating, electrifying, and energizing all your cells, your molecules, your electrons, creating a brilliant beam of light and energy from your heart out into the world. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's press our palms together. Vigorously rub your hands together to feel the friction, the temperature, the pressure, the motion, the tickling and tingling when you stop. And allow all those sensations to bring you present right here, right now, into this remarkable physical form that enables us to experience life. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So today we're talking about rattling the cage. And this comes from a conversation that I had with a friend who is kind of questioning everything and questioning why be here. That's a big one. And the question, the rattling the cage questions are really disruptive, really disruptive. And that's kind of the point, because when we allow ourselves to question the unexamined, sometimes first we might end up with the discomfort of the unknown, and then we might end up with dissatisfaction, and then we tend to generate something new, and maybe even give ourselves permission to entertain possibilities that we wouldn't have otherwise entertained. So the example that this person gave me was very, very interesting, of how they didn't feel like they could count on anything anymore, like that who knows what to believe about whatever, or getting our foundational assumptions kind of blown up or shifted. So here's the story. They were listening to a podcast that I that was kind of, well, revisiting history. And it happens that the podcaster, I believe, is a Black woman. And that's relevant because, as in our white culture, we have, in our white dominated culture, we have been raised to believe in this country that Abraham Lincoln was a champion who had slavery abolished, freed the slaves. And that along with that, we have been enculturated to believe that he was a champion for human rights, etc. And what this podcaster was making clear through historical documents and writings was that Lincoln didn't have any particular love for Black people, but he saw abolishing slavery as a way of crippling the South and strengthening the Union. And I have not done my research about this. I'm not validating it or invalidating it or advocating it. But what I'm saying is that they've long said that history is written by the victor. And the stories that we are raised into, whether they're family stories, family mythologies, or religious mythologies, or cultural mythologies, and I'm using the word mythology as story, or themes or histories even, that they change. They are not complete, shall we say. So I'm experiencing this. I've been talking about how I'm going through all old letters and rediscovering people that I hadn't thought of in years, and finding communications from people I have no recollection of. And so it's kind of rewriting my own history. And we do this historically. Like we can see, for instance, Columbus was hailed as a hero. Good morning, Jennifer. Welcome. So good to have you back with us. We're talking about rattling the cage of assumptions. So, for instance, I mean, there's so many ways that, so many examples, but Christopher Columbus was hailed as a hero. And then it turns out, we get to see that there was all kinds of violence against the native peoples in this country. And the world used to be flat until it wasn't anymore. So these beliefs that we hold, I think, get to be challenged. And one of the reasons that we don't challenge these beliefs is because when we have a belief and we think we know what something is, then we can kind of put it in its little container, put it aside, and move on to whatever's next. We don't have to consider it anymore. It's a given. The thing is that there's so many things that are related to as givens that maybe aren't. And as we evolve, well, it's challenging because, again, it's not a linear thing. We're evolving and devolving all at the same time, it seems. But another assumption, and this is a big deal because right now we're in the throes of, or maybe even the beginning of, an extreme economic crisis. And we've seen these tariffs being imposed and the markets absolutely crashing, and predictions of a major recession. And there's a lot of fear, climate of fear around money and finance and where we're going with things. And one of the assumptions economically that we've operated under is that the GDP, the gross domestic product, is an indicator, or we're using the gross domestic product as an indicator of economic health. But the thing is that it's talking about how much money was spent essentially in the economy. And the more that's spent, the better. And it's based on an assumption of continued growth forever. That the economy needs to grow by a certain amount every year. And when we're talking about growing an economy on a contained planet, there are limits to that, right? Anyway, who would have thought that I'd be talking about economics? Anyway, so just as an example of how this assumption about economics is really destructive in and of itself, one of these assumptions we need to question is that the health sector, for instance, is huge, generates tons and tons, millions, maybe billions, maybe trillions, certainly maybe trillions of dollars, certainly billions. Good morning, Dido. Welcome. So good to have you here. Who would have thought it would be an economics conversation, at least part of this? Anyway, the thing that makes the health sector so abundant in terms of GDP is the fact that people are not well. So these kinds of discordances, to say, well, the economy is really healthy because we have so many sick people, in one instance, it's kind of crazy. And I'm using that as an example, not so because I'm any kind of economic genius, which I'm not, or that you even care about the machinations of economics, but to say that we operate under so many assumptions that are just assumed, that we just don't even question, and therefore we are condemned to continue to be at the effect of them, and they have their effect. I mean, there's a lot of ramifications for the whole economic idea that I just touched on, but we have all kinds of ramifications in our own lives. So it often takes an extreme event to make us question our lives and how we're living and what our choices are. And those extreme events can be devastating, oftentimes are devastating. And even in being devastating, sometimes they can be a catalyst for the most positive kinds of changes that we can make in our lives. So a friend of mine had a heart attack the other day, and they're okay. So thank heavens for that. And it is causing them to really rethink what they're up to in life and what life is about and how they want to live it, if they want to live it, how they want to recreate it. And this reminds me of a conversation that I had with a very dear friend, actually in an interview. that I did with her. She is is Dr. Kristen Ryman. She's a remarkable human, and a double board certified MD. And she had, I forget, she specializes in working with people with medically mysterious illnesses, things that conventional doctoring doesn't really know what to do with. And she had Lyme disease. I think, and I believe it was when she had Lyme disease. It was really crippling. And she went to a doctor, and the doctor said, I have to ask you, do you want to live or not? And it was such a bold and important question for the doctor to ask. You know, the doctor was saying, do you want to live or do you want to, because she said she felt like she was dying, the doc, or do you want to just sort of fade away? You know, like, what are your commitments? And my friend said that she would have to think about it. And she did. And the way that she thought about it was, well, what if I didn't live? What if I chose not to live? And what would that be like? And she allowed herself the opportunity to think about the people she loved and think about how she wouldn't get to see her family grow into their lives more richly. And she said she didn't really have a lot of emotion about considering not being here. And I may be messing this story up a bit, but the takeaway is that in thinking about living, when she gave herself permission to really look at the kind of life she wanted, she got connected to her commitment to really make a difference, to show up, to speak her voice, to speak her heart. And she did, and she does. And she's a powerhouse. And I have a similar story of my own when I realized that I had decided that I was going to die, I was going to kill myself. And I figured out where I was going to do it. And I had a moment realizing, oh my gosh, I think I should get some help. And I did. And that incident, through that incident, I gave myself permission to do something that I really wanted to do, despite what other people might think, despite wanting other people's approval, family members, etc. I just decided I'm going to do what I want to do, because otherwise I was so unhappy that I was willing to not be here. So I guess what I'm inviting is to rattle the cage of those assumptions and beliefs, and to actually look at our lives and say, is this the life I want to be living? And to give ourselves permission to actually choose the life we want to live without having to get to that extreme point. It's kind of like how they say you have to hit bottom first. Well, I'm wondering if it's necessary to hit bottom. And it may be. It may be, because making that kind of radical choice means disruption. It's uncomfortable. It means making big changes that can be very difficult to make. It may mean changing in relationships. It may mean changing where we live. It may mean changing jobs. It's big. It's big, and it takes a lot of momentum and energy to make that kind of radical choice, because it's a lot easier to hang in with something, even if we're not happy with it. It's kind of like the devil you know versus the devil you don't, right? Not that, and I don't believe in the devil, just in, not to take that out of context there. To have the courage to make these changes, to make them consciously without emergency, because the emergency makes us have to go through a recovery period, right? To reassemble ourselves somehow. But if we can create, rattle the cage, we might just break free. And there may be a way to do that without having to suffer the agonies of burning things down first. And it's interesting because I know several people whose homes had literally burned down, and it gave them an opportunity for new beginnings as well. I imagine that a lot of us know people whose homes have burned down with all the crazy fires and such. But what if we can allow ourselves to step into our vision and our dreams without first creating a crisis, or allowing ourselves to generate that crisis ourselves in a conscious way? So, like, my choosing to move from where I am for where I've been for 24 years, I recognize that I'm kind of choosing to step into that disruption. Maybe not a crisis, but a disruption. I am intending that it not be a crisis. I'm intending that it be something that is filled with magic and opportunity. But that's what we can do when we choose to make these shifts, when we rattle the cages to see, is this really where I want to be? Let's look at our assumptions. Let's ask the question, if I could make it up however I want it to be, what would I choose? And then we can start using that vision as an intention to move into. Of course, we want to keep those, we want those intentions to be aligned with our essence. And it helps to have those intentions be being intentions as much or more than doing intentions. When the doing is motivated by a state of being, that's great. When the doing is for the doing itself, then that's a cage of its own. So I invite you to rattle the cage. Ask yourself the tough questions, and then muster the courage to take the steps to be willing to have the disruption on the way to fuller expression. I understand why we need the crisis, because it has to get so bad till we have no choice but to make the choice. But do we have to wait till it gets to that state? I guess that's the question. Maybe not. Anyway, that's it for this morning. I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection, and I go live here each weekday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern here on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page and YouTube channel. And I invite you to please like, follow, and share Enlightened World Network and me. The links are in the description. Dido says, when our being is the basis for motivating action. Love it. Thank you, Dido. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. It's always a pleasure and a privilege. And until next time, so much.